Almost everyone has felt it at least once in their lives, that strange heaviness that settles over you after a conversation. You leave the room and something feels off. Your chest is heavy, your mind is foggy, your energy feels drained, as if someone silently reached inside you and pulled something essential out, yet they never raised their voice, never insulted you, never even touched you. This is not your imagination. It's a real psychological phenomenon, and it happens far more often than we realize. Carl Jung once said, "What makes people suffer is not what happens outside of them, but how the energy of others touches their inner world." And in our modern lives, where we live, work, and build relationships in constant proximity to others, the influence of toxic energy has become one of the most underestimated forces shaping our emotional health. But the real danger is not the existence of toxic people around us. It's how easily their energy slips into our psychological system without us even noticing. We tend to think that in order to be hurt, someone must do something obvious: shout, betray, humiliate, or deceive. But the truth is, many of the deepest wounds don't come from actions at all. They come from energy, from a glance, a tone of voice, a subtle reaction, or the absence of care. A controlling parent may never use harsh words, but the weight of their silent disappointment can follow a child for decades. A colleague might act polite on the surface, but constantly compares and competes, slowly eroding your self-worth. A partner who always plays the victim can trap you in a cycle of guilt that you can't seem to escape. This happens because toxic energy doesn't enter through obvious doors. It seeps in through the unprotected corners of the psyche. It finds its way into our deepest insecurities, our fear of rejection, our longing for approval, our unresolved wounds. And once it's inside, it starts shaping the way we think and feel. We begin to doubt ourselves. We shrink. We silence our truth to keep the peace. And slowly, we stop living as our authentic selves and instead become the version of ourselves that the toxic environment wants us to be. If you've ever wondered why you seem to attract the same harmful people again and again, why you keep getting pulled into draining relationships where energy only flows out but never back in, the answer may not lie in them, but in the unhealed parts of you. As Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And those unconscious wounds, the ones we haven't fully seen or faced, are exactly where toxic energy enters and takes root. So how do we protect ourselves? How do we stop being dragged into other people's psychological games? How do we prevent their pain from becoming our responsibility? The solution isn't about changing the toxic people in our lives, because we can't. The solution is about understanding how toxic energy works and building an inner defense system strong enough to block it. That means learning how to set healthy boundaries, developing self-awareness, reading psychological signals before they take hold, and, most importantly, healing ourselves so that we are no longer fertile ground for someone else's poison. In this video, we're going beyond the surface. We're not simply going to list the 6 types of toxic people, as we may have done before. Instead, we're going deeper, into the realm of self-protection and healing. You'll learn how to guard your inner space against each type of toxic energy, how to hold your center in a manipulative family dynamic, how to stay grounded in a controlling workplace, how to stop internalizing shame in a relationship, and how to free yourself from emotional entanglement disguised as love. We'll also explore how to heal after exposure to toxic energy. Because the truth is, none of us can avoid it completely. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional and control was constant. Maybe you've been in a relationship where guilt and manipulation wore the mask of affection. Maybe you work under a boss whose criticism slowly eats away at your confidence. Whatever your story is, it does not define your future. What matters is that starting today, you can reclaim your energy, rebuild your boundaries, and recenter your sense of self so that no one else gets to write the story of your life but you. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to pause and reflect. In how many of your relationships do you feel energized, uplifted, and expanded? And in how many do you feel drained, small, or exhausted? The answer to that question is often the clearest mirror of what's really happening beneath the surface. And it's from that place of honest reflection that we begin this journey. A journey not just to recognize the toxic energies around us, but to learn how to stand firmly in our own light, no matter how strong someone else's darkness may be. To understand how to protect ourselves from toxic people, we must first understand a deeper truth. Toxic energy rarely attacks us directly. It does not knock down the door. It does not announce itself. Instead, it slips in quietly, subtly, almost invisibly, through the smallest cracks in our self-awareness. And those cracks usually exist in places we least expect, in our childhood wounds, in our longing to be loved, in our fear of rejection, in the stories we carry about our worth. The psyche, your inner world, is not a fortress with concrete walls. It is more like a living ecosystem, constantly interacting with the environment around it. Every conversation, every relationship, every emotional exchange leaves an imprint. And when we're around people with deeply negative, manipulative, or narcissistic patterns, their energy doesn't just bounce off us, it seeps in. It fuses with our thoughts, shapes our emotional reactions, and over time, it can even rewire the way we see ourselves. Carl Jung believed that one of the most dangerous forces in human psychology is projection, the unconscious process of transferring what we deny or reject within ourselves onto others. Toxic people project constantly. The manipulator projects their fear of powerlessness by trying to control others. The narcissist projects their hidden shame by belittling those around them. The emotionally immature project their inability to take responsibility by blaming the world. And when we are not deeply aware, we unconsciously absorb those projections and so, I see one shucks or and start believing they belong to us. It's how a child raised by a critical parent can grow into an adult with a relentless inner critic. It's how a person gaslighted in a relationship begins to doubt their own memory, their own perception of reality. It's how a worker in a toxic office culture begins to feel lazy or incompetent even when they're overworking themselves to exhaustion. The external voice becomes an internal one. And soon, the enemy isn't just outside of us. It's living inside our minds, speaking with our own voice. But the penetration of toxic energy is not just psychological. It's deeply physiological too. Modern neuroscience has shown that our nervous systems are social. They constantly mirror, adapt to, and regulate based on the emotional states of those around us. This is known as co-regulation, a survival mechanism wired into us since infancy. As babies, our heartbeat, breathing, and emotional state sync with our caregivers. As adults, the same system keeps operating. When we are around calm, safe people, our bodies regulate into safety. But when we are around unpredictable, angry, manipulative, or emotionally unstable people, our bodies slip into chronic vigilance, a subtle state of fight, flight, or freeze that drains energy and weakens resilience over time. This is why you might feel exhausted after being around someone toxic, even if nothing happened. Your body wasn't resting, it was working, it was analyzing, adapting, defending, decoding microsignals of threat. And over weeks, months, or years, that constant hypervigilance rewires your baseline state of being. Anxiety becomes normal, self-doubt becomes habitual, and the deeper tragedy is this. We stop noticing it. We confuse familiarity with safety, and we stay. This is why so many people remain trapped in toxic dynamics, not because they are weak or foolish, but because their nervous system has been conditioned to associate chaos with love, criticism with care, control with protection. These patterns often start in childhood, where love and harm were deeply intertwined. If you grew up needing to please a volatile parent to stay safe, your adult self might tolerate manipulation from a partner because it feels familiar. If your childhood taught you that being good meant keeping the peace, you might silence your truth around toxic friends or co-workers just to avoid conflict. The toxic dynamic, then, is not just an external problem. It's internalized. It becomes a pattern etched into your psyche and physiology. And this is why simple advice like just cut them off or just don't let it bother you rarely works. You can't just cut off something that has been woven into your nervous system since childhood. You can't simply ignore energy that your body has been conditioned to absorb. The good news is that once we understand this mechanism, we can begin to dismantle it, piece by piece. The first step is awareness. We must learn to notice the subtle signs of energetic intrusion before they become internalized narratives. For example, you feel inexplicably guilty after talking to someone, even though you did nothing wrong. You second-guess your decisions around a certain person, even though you were confident before. You leave a conversation feeling smaller, weaker, or less capable than when you entered it. You keep replaying their words in your mind long after they've left the room. These are not coincidences. These are symptoms, signals that someone's energy has crossed into your psychological space. And awareness is the moment we begin to reclaim sovereignty. Because the truth is, you cannot defend a boundary you do not know exists. The next step is understanding that boundaries are not walls. They are filters. Walls block everything, even the good. But filters let love in and keep poison out. Healthy boundaries are not about cutting people off. They're about deciding what you will and will not allow to shape your inner world. This means learning to say no without guilt. It means recognizing that someone's disappointment is not your responsibility. It means refusing to internalize someone else's self-hatred disguised as criticism. And finally, we must learn how to return energy that does not belong to us. A powerful practice is this. When you catch yourself thinking a harsh thought, "I'm not good enough, I'm too much, I'm a failure," pause and ask, whose voice is this? Very often, you'll realize it's not yours. It's your mother's, your ex's, your boss's, your teacher's. And once you see that, you can choose to let it go. You can say, "This is not my story," and send it back to where it came from. Understanding the mechanics of toxic energy is not just an intellectual exercise. It's the foundation of emotional self-defense. Because once you see how it works, you stop taking it personally. You stop internalizing it. And when you stop internalizing it, you reclaim the space within yourself that was never meant to belong to anyone else. This journey is not about building an impenetrable fortress around your heart. It's about becoming so deeply anchored in who you are that no one else's chaos can shake your foundation. It's about becoming so aware of your inner landscape that no projection can plant its seeds there. And it's about remembering, above all, that the most powerful protection is not withdrawal. It is presence. The more conscious you are, the less room there is for unconscious toxicity to take hold. Among all the toxic personalities you might encounter in life, emotional manipulators are perhaps the most dangerous, not because they are loud, aggressive, or openly hostile, but precisely because they are subtle, quiet, and incredibly hard to detect. They rarely attack head-on. They don't scream. They don't threaten. They don't force. Instead, they gently and slowly infiltrate your emotional system, shaping your behavior, thoughts, and self-perception in ways you don't even notice. And by the time you do, you're already deeply entangled in their web. What makes emotional manipulators so dangerous is not their actions in themselves, but how they gradually transform you into a tool that serves their emotional needs. They could be the romantic partner who constantly plays the victim so that you feel guilty. They could be the mother who cries every time you don't do what she wants. They could be the boss who showers you with praise so you'll work unpaid overtime. None of these behaviors look harmful on the surface. In fact, they often disguise themselves as love, care, or appreciation. But the outcome is always the same. You lose the sense of ownership over your own life. In family dynamics, manipulation is often dressed in the language of love. A parent doesn't have to order or yell to control you. All they have to do is plant a seed of guilt, the most powerful emotional weapon. Imagine a young man in the US with a dream job offer in another state. Every time he talks about moving, his mother starts crying and says, "I sacrificed everything for you, and now you're going to leave me?" That sentence sounds like a heartfelt confession, but it's actually a psychological trap. It hits him right in his deepest vulnerability, his fear of being ungrateful. And that's enough to keep him stuck. Instead of pursuing his dream, he stays. He gives up his ambitions and lives a life shaped by someone else's expectations. The first thing you must understand is this: their emotions are not your responsibility. When family members use guilt or sadness as tools of control, they are making a choice, and you have the right to make your own. A simple, calm sentence like, "I understand you're upset, but I also have a life to live," is a boundary, and boundaries are essential. If conversations keep turning into blame sessions, it's okay to end them. If tears are being used as weapons, it's okay to walk away. Manipulators cannot control you without fuel, and that fuel is your emotional reaction. In romantic relationships, manipulation often takes on a different form. It's built on the fear of loss. Manipulators in love don't guilt you into staying. They keep you hooked by creating emotional instability. One day they're loving and affectionate, the next they're distant and cold. They make you feel like you constantly have to earn their love, and that keeps you chasing after it. A common example in modern America is the ghosting and gaslighting cycle. A manipulative partner disappears without warning when you do something they dislike, only to reappear and tell you that you're too sensitive for feeling hurt. They deny your reality, distort your perception, and make you question your sanity. Over time, you start doubting yourself, wondering if you're overreacting, if you're the problem, if maybe you're not good enough. This is the heart of manipulation. You stop trusting yourself and start believing their version of reality. The most powerful antidote to this is rooting yourself firmly in your own worth. Someone who truly loves you will never make you feel like you have to prove that you deserve their love. If you feel like you're constantly performing to be good enough, that's not love, that's control. Pay attention to how you feel after interactions. A person who loves you will leave you feeling safe, open, and confident. A manipulator will leave you feeling small, anxious, or desperate to please. And when you notice that, don't be afraid of losing them. Be afraid of losing yourself. When they gaslight you with phrases like, "You're overreacting," or "I was just joking," "You're too sensitive," hold your ground. This is my feeling, and it's valid. When they punish you with silence, resist the urge to chase. Let the silence reveal the truth. Love should never be something you have to beg for. In the workplace, manipulation hides behind professionalism. A manipulative boss might say, "You're the only one I trust with this project," knowing that your need to be valued will make you take on more than you should. You stay late, work harder, sacrifice more, and when you burn out, they accuse you of being unreliable. Or perhaps a co-worker uses friendliness as a way to exploit your time and effort, constantly asking for help and then taking credit for your work. They make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, framing you as selfish if you don't overextend yourself. Here, boundaries are not just about saying no, they're about knowing what is enough. You can do your job well without carrying the weight of the entire office. Learn to refuse politely but firmly. I'm happy to support where I can, but I can't take on additional responsibilities. Refusal is not selfish, it's self-respect. Manipulators thrive on your fear of not being liked. Once you no longer need universal approval, their power begins to fade. If you've spent years in a manipulative environment, please understand you are not weak. Manipulators don't choose their targets randomly. They are drawn to people who are compassionate, empathetic, and selfless. Ironically, your most beautiful qualities become vulnerabilities if they are not protected by strong boundaries. Healing begins with learning to trust your emotions again. After years of manipulation, you might doubt your own feelings, dismiss them as too much or imagined. But your emotions are not wrong. They are signals. Feeling used, coerced, or pressured is your soul's way of telling you something is not right. Listen to it. The next step in healing is reclaiming the center of your life. Anytime you notice yourself living primarily to please someone else, pause and ask, is this aligned with What makes people like this so damaging is not just their falseness, it's how they make you doubt yourself. They convince you that you're the problem for wanting authenticity. They make you feel guilty for speaking the truth. They create a world where falseness is considered normal and honesty becomes a threat. And little by little, you start wearing your own mask just to survive. You laugh when you don't want to. You stay silent when you want to scream. You nod in agreement when you desperately want to disagree. All to maintain the harmony they demand. That is how you lose yourself without even realizing it. So how do we protect ourselves from people who live behind masks? The first step is to see through the mask with awareness. Don't judge people by what they present. Pay attention to how they react when their image is challenged. Authentic people are open to feedback. They can admit mistakes. They are willing to have uncomfortable conversations. Mask wearers become defensive, deny, and focus on protecting their image above all else. When there's a stark gap between their words and their actions, between the persona they show and the person they reveal under stress, that's a sign you're not dealing with authenticity. The second step is to refuse to play a role in their performance. Those who live behind masks need an audience. If you refuse to play your part, the performance begins to fall apart. That doesn't mean you have to expose or confront them dramatically. It simply means staying grounded in your own truth. If they deny wrongdoing, calmly say, I understand your perspective, but this is my experience. If they try to silence you to protect their image, gently but firmly reply, I choose honesty, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Every time you refuse to step onto their stage, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. The third, and perhaps most important step, is not letting your value be defined by someone else's image. One reason we fall into the trap of enabling masked individuals is our fear of judgment. We fear being seen as difficult or bad if we don't participate in their performance. But your worth is not dependent on keeping anyone else comfortable. It's not measured by how well you help someone maintain their illusion. It's measured by how truthfully you live. Remember this: authenticity might cost you some relationships, but it will save your soul. And that trade is always worth it. Healing after living around such people involves relearning how to trust your own realness. After years of performing to please others, you might have forgotten who you truly are. You might suppress emotions out of habit. You might censor your thoughts before you speak. Start small. Express your feelings honestly. Admit when you're not okay. Allow yourself to show the messy, imperfect, unpolished parts of you. Every time you do, a piece of your inner mask falls away, and you will begin to feel more alive, more grounded, more free. The reality is, society will always have people who live through images. But you don't have to be part of their play. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's narrative. You don't have to hide your truth to keep their illusion intact. You are allowed to exist fully, unapologetically, imperfectly, as yourself. And when you do, no mask, no performance, no carefully crafted persona will ever have power over your life again. There is a certain kind of toxic person whose danger is not obvious at first glance. They are not manipulative in a dramatic way. They do not shout, belittle, or control openly. In fact, many of them appear deeply virtuous, principled, and righteous. They speak about values, morality, truth, and the right way to live. They often claim that everything they do is for your own good. And yet, behind this mask of virtue, they are capable of doing something profoundly damaging, crushing your authenticity, controlling your life through guilt, and slowly convincing you that who you are is not enough. Carl Jung often warned about this type of personality, the moralizer and the shadow projector. They are two sides of the same coin. The moralizer hides behind a false sense of superiority, convinced that they know what is best for everyone. The shadow projector hides behind denial, unable to face their own darkness, and so they hurl it onto others. Both are deeply unconscious. Both are rooted in fear and insecurity, and both can wreak havoc on your inner world if you are not aware. Let us begin with the moralizer. You've probably met them many times. Perhaps they are a parent who has an opinion about every choice you make, a partner who constantly tells you how you should behave, or a co-worker who is always preaching about what's right. On the surface, these people may seem well-intentioned. They might say they are guiding you. They might even believe that. But their actions are not about guidance. They are about control. Their shoulds and musts are not invitations. They are weapons. They use morality not to inspire, but to dominate. Imagine a young woman in the United States growing up in a strict household. Her parents constantly remind her that a good daughter sacrifices her own dreams for the family, that a good woman behaves in certain ways, that a good person never questions authority. At first, these messages seem harmless, even loving, but over time, they become chains around her soul. She begins to doubt her own desires, silence her own opinions, and mold herself into the version of good her parents approve of. And one day, she wakes up and realizes she doesn't know who she is anymore. This is the quiet power of the moralizer. They don't just tell you what to do. They make you question your right to decide for yourself. And they are especially dangerous because they cloak their control in virtue. You cannot rebel without feeling bad. You cannot set boundaries without feeling selfish. You cannot live authentically without feeling wrong. And that is exactly how they keep you in line. The most important thing to understand is this. Morality is not the same as control. Someone's sense of right does not automatically give them authority over your life. Their values may guide their choices, but they do not define yours. When a moralizer tries to shame you into submission, remember, shame is not proof of wrongdoing. Guilt is not evidence of sin. You are not obligated to shrink yourself just because someone else is uncomfortable with your freedom. Setting boundaries with a moralizer often requires deep inner strength because they will try to weaponize guilt. They may say, "I'm only trying to help," or "I'm disappointed in you." They may accuse you of being selfish, disrespectful, or immoral. When this happens, take a breath and remind yourself, their feelings are theirs to manage. You do not owe them obedience. You owe yourself a life that is true. A simple, calm response like, "I appreciate your perspective, but I need to make my own decisions," is often enough. And if they cannot accept that, it's not your responsibility to make them comfortable. Now let's turn to the second type, the shadow projector. Jung believed that every human carries a shadow. The parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or cannot accept. It includes traits we've labeled as bad or unacceptable, such as anger, envy, selfishness, laziness, or desire. The more we deny these traits, the stronger they become in our unconscious. And because we can't bear to see them in ourselves, we begin to see them everywhere else, especially in others. This is why a person who has never dealt with their own anger will call everyone else too angry. A deeply selfish person will accuse others of being self-centered. Someone who suppresses their sexual desires will obsess over other people's immorality. This is projection, the unconscious attempt to rid ourselves of our shadow by dumping it onto others. And when people do this to you, it can feel deeply confusing and painful. Imagine you have a coworker who constantly criticizes you for being lazy, even though you're the most hardworking person in the office. Or a friend who accuses you of being selfish every time you say no, despite the fact that they never do anything for anyone else. Or a parent who calls you ungrateful for setting boundaries, even though they take your support for granted. None of these accusations are about you. They're about them. They are fragments of themselves that they cannot face, projected onto the nearest available target. You. The danger of living around people like this is that over time, you may start to believe them. If someone calls you selfish enough times, you might start questioning your motives. If someone labels you difficult for having boundaries, you might start doubting your right to them. And if someone condemns your anger while hiding their own, you might suppress it and lose access to your natural power. The first step to protecting yourself is recognizing when projection is happening. A good rule of thumb is this: if someone's accusation feels exaggerated, out of proportion, or inconsistent with reality, it's probably not about you. If their criticism tells you more about their fears, their insecurities, or their hidden desires than about your actual behavior, you're dealing with projection. And once you see it for what it is, you can stop internalizing it. The second step is learning to hand back what isn't yours. You can do this mentally, even silently. The next time someone calls you selfish for prioritizing your mental health, say to yourself, "That's not mine, that's theirs." If someone accuses you of being too emotional when they're the ones overreacting, tell yourself, "I don't have to carry their denial." It might sound simple, but this inner practice is profoundly powerful. It is how you separate your reality from their distortion. Finally, the deepest form of protection is to integrate your own shadow. Because the truth is, projection works best when we haven't made peace with our own darkness. If you're afraid of your anger, it's easier for someone to use it against you. If you hate your selfishness, it's easier to believe them when they call you selfish. But if you've acknowledged and accepted these parts of yourself, if you know that sometimes you can be selfish or angry or flawed, then their projections lose their sting. You can say, "Yes, I have that side, but it doesn't define me." You stop defending and start discerning. Healing from the influence of moralizers and shadow projectors requires a profound return to self-trust. You must learn to trust your inner compass more than their loud opinions. You must trust your lived experience over their distorted narratives. And you must trust that your worth does not depend on anyone else's approval. In practical terms, this means surrounding yourself with people who do not demand perfection, who allow you to be human, and who respect your autonomy. It means practicing self-compassion, reminding yourself that mistakes are not sins, that desires are not shameful, that boundaries are not betrayals. It means speaking your truth even when your voice shakes and choosing authenticity over approval, again and again. And most importantly, it means remembering this. The people who judge you most harshly are often at war with themselves. Their judgment is a mirror, not a truth. Their shame belongs to them, not you. Their projections are about their wounds, not your worth. When you see this clearly, you stop taking their words personally. You stop shrinking to make them comfortable, and you start walking your path with quiet confidence, knowing that you are free. The moralizer and the shadow projector will always exist. They will always try to use shame and judgment to control. They will always attempt to hand you pieces of themselves they cannot face. But when you learn to set boundaries, return what isn't yours, and embrace your own complexity, their power dissolves. You stop dancing to their tune, you stop living under their gaze, and you finally begin to live, not as who they think you should be, but as who you truly are. Among all the toxic dynamics we encounter in life, there is one that often goes unnoticed because it does not look toxic at all on the surface. It doesn't come with manipulation, aggression, or control. It doesn't shout, dominate, or humiliate. In fact, it often wears the face of vulnerability. It looks like someone who is broken, who has suffered, who needs love and understanding. It looks like someone who is simply asking for help. But beneath that plea lies one of the most dangerous patterns for your mental and emotional well-being, the savior trap. When someone's unresolved wounds pull you into a relationship where your role is no longer to love them, but to save them. Carl Jung once said, "There is nothing more dangerous than a person who has not confronted their own darkness because they will seek others to do it for them." And this is precisely what happens with people who live through their wounds. Instead of taking responsibility for their healing, they look outward. They look for someone, a partner, a friend, a child, to carry the weight of their pain, to soothe their emptiness, to fix what they refuse to face. At first, it might even feel noble to help them. You might feel like you're doing something meaningful, like you are saving someone's life. But slowly, you will begin to realize the truth. In trying to save them, you are losing yourself. Imagine you are in a relationship with someone who constantly fears abandonment. They tell you stories about their painful childhood, about how they were never loved enough, how everyone they've trusted has betrayed them, and then they say, "You're the only person who makes me feel worthy." It sounds romantic, even beautiful, but beneath those words is a heavy, invisible chain. That sentence transforms you from a partner into a savior. It shifts the relationship from an equal connection to a responsibility. And now, every time you fail to meet their emotional needs, they fall apart. They cry, they blame you. They say, "If you really loved me, you'd never let me feel this way." And to stop the guilt, you try harder, give more, sacrifice more, until there's nothing left of you. In psychology, this dynamic is known as a trauma bond, a connection rooted not in love, but in pain. The wounded person unconsciously recreates the same patterns they experienced in the past, seeking comfort in what is familiar, even if it's unhealthy. They want you to fill a void that can only be healed from within. But that void is bottomless. You can pour love, time, energy, even your soul into it. But if they do not choose to confront their inner wounds, nothing you do will ever be enough. This savior dynamic does not only happen in romantic relationships, it shows up in families too. Some parents, burdened by their own trauma, look to their children to become their emotional support system. They expect their children to stay close, to sacrifice their own dreams, to repay them for everything. And when the child tries to build an independent life, the parent lashes out, "I gave you everything, and this is how you treat me." This is not love. This is emotional dependency disguised as love. And if you're not careful, you might spend your entire life carrying emotional weight that was never yours to bear. It also appears in workplaces. There might be a colleague or a boss who constantly blames their personal problems for their behavior, expecting you to pick up their slack out of understanding, or a coworker who uses their struggles as a reason why you should always help them. Compassion is a beautiful thing, but when compassion becomes obligation, when empathy turns into responsibility, you are no longer being kind, you are being consumed. So how do you protect yourself from this savior trap? The first and most crucial step is understanding that you are not responsible for anyone's healing. You can love someone deeply, you can support them wholeheartedly, but you cannot heal them. You cannot fix their past, erase their trauma, or make them whole. Only they can do that. If someone says, "I would fall apart without you," you have every right to respond, "I care about you deeply, but you must learn to stand on your own feet." This is not cruelty. It is mature love. The second step is establishing clear emotional boundaries. If someone constantly comes to you to dump their pain without any effort to work through it, you have the right to say no. If someone expects you to sacrifice your time, energy, or dreams to save them, you have the right to refuse. Remember, boundaries are not selfish. They are an act of self-respect. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot save someone if saving them means losing yourself. One of the most powerful skills you can develop is the ability to tolerate guilt. This is where many compassionate people get trapped. When we say no to someone in pain, we feel guilty. We wonder, am I being unkind? Will they suffer if I don't help? But you must understand that there are two kinds of guilt. The guilt you feel when you do something wrong, and the guilt you feel when you do something right, but fail to please someone. The second kind is not a signal to change your behavior. It's a sign that you're growing. Finally, it is essential to return responsibility to where it belongs. When someone tries to unload their pain, their problems, or their healing onto you, respond gently but firmly. I understand what you're going through, but only you can change this. When a friend says, "I can't survive without you," remind them, "I'm here for you, but survival is your choice." When a parent says, "You're the reason I live," you can respond, "I love you, but your life is yours to live, not mine." This is not cold. This is clarity. It's the difference between carrying someone and walking beside them. The healing process after years of playing the savior role can be painful. You might realize how much of your energy, time, and identity you've given away trying to rescue others. You might feel guilt or fear when you start saying no, but remember, saying no to saving others is not saying no to love. It's saying yes to yourself. It's how you make space to love in a healthier, more sustainable way. To love without losing yourself, to care without carrying, to support without sacrificing your soul. And here's the paradoxical beauty of it all. When you stop trying to save people, you actually give them the greatest gift possible, the chance to grow. Because when there's no one left to carry them, they must learn to walk. When there's no one left to fix them, they must face themselves. And it is only then, when they take responsibility for their own lives, that true healing begins. You cannot learn to swim if someone is always swimming for you. You cannot learn to stand if someone is always holding you up. And others cannot heal if they never face their own wounds. There will always be people in this world who try to make you their savior. They will always look to you to save them from their pain. But you do not have to take on that role. You can love without losing yourself. You can help without carrying the weight. You can walk beside someone without walking for them. And when you learn to do that, the pull of dependency loses its power. You step out of the exhausting cycle of saving and step into a new life. One where love is not a burden, but a partnership. Where kindness is not self-sacrifice, but mutual respect. In that life, your heart is no longer drained by endless giving. Your energy is no longer swallowed by someone else's wounds, and your love, once bound by duty, becomes free, honest, and whole. You no longer save others to prove your worth. You no longer carry pain that isn't yours. Instead, you stand firmly in your own power, knowing that the most loving thing you can do for another soul is not to save them, but to remind them of their own strength, and then step back so they can discover it for themselves. There is a kind of toxic person who rarely yells, rarely manipulates directly, and rarely attacks you outright. They don't necessarily control, criticize, or abuse you. In fact, they might even seem harmless, charming, or needy on the surface. Yet, every time you're around them, you leave feeling tired, emotionally, mentally, even physically. It's as if they've reached inside you and quietly siphoned off your life force. These are the people psychologists and healers often call energy vampires. And just like their mythological namesake, energy vampires rarely feed in obvious ways. They don't bite, they drain. They feed not on blood, but on attention, validation, empathy, time, and emotional energy. They come into your life and consume your light without ever giving back. And if you don't learn how to protect yourself, they can leave you hollow. Not because they broke you, but because you kept pouring yourself into them until nothing remained. The first thing you must understand about energy vampires is that many of them are not consciously malicious. They are not necessarily bad people. Most of the time, they are deeply wounded individuals who have never learned how to generate their own emotional energy. They rely on others to feel alive, validated, or worthy. And just like a starving person reaching for food, they instinctively reach for the energy of those around them. But their hunger is insatiable, because the hole inside them is not one that can ever be filled from the outside. There are many faces that energy vampires wear. Some come as the perpetual victim. These people always have a problem, a crisis, or a tragedy. Life is always unfair to them. Nothing ever goes right. They're always hurt, betrayed, misunderstood. And because they position themselves as victims, you feel obligated to comfort them, reassure them, fix things for them. But no matter how much you give, it's never enough. The moment one crisis is solved, another emerges. Their pain becomes a black hole, one that devours your energy and leaves you drained. Others appear as the drama magnet. These people thrive on chaos. They turn small disagreements into wars, minor inconveniences into catastrophes. They gossip, exaggerate, and stir conflict wherever they go. And somehow, you always end up in the middle of their storms. Their emotional volatility keeps you on edge. You find yourself constantly reacting, calming them down, walking on eggshells, until your nervous system is exhausted and your peace is gone. Then there's the chronic complainer. Nothing is ever good enough for them. The weather is too hot, their job is too stressful, their relationships are too complicated. They drain you not by demanding your help, but by constantly bombarding you with negativity. You try to offer solutions, but they reject them. You try to cheer them up, but they remain miserable. And eventually, you find yourself matching their energy. feeling just as heavy and hopeless as they do. And of course, there's the narcissistic vampire. Unlike the others, they know how to drain you, and they do it deliberately. They crave attention, admiration, and control. They monopolize conversations, redirect everything back to themselves, and subtly belittle your needs. Their presence feels suffocating because your energy is constantly flowing outward, toward their ego, their problems, their narrative, and never returning to you. But no matter the form they take, all energy vampires have one thing in common. Being around them leaves you depleted. You feel tired, irritable, anxious, or emotionally heavy. Sometimes you even feel physically drained, as if you've run a marathon just by listening to them. This is not your imagination. Emotional energy is real, and just like physical energy, it can be exhausted. When you give too much of it away without replenishment, your body, mind, and soul begin to pay the price. So how can you protect yourself from this silent drain? The first step is awareness. Start paying attention to how you feel around certain people. Do you feel lighter, calmer, and more grounded, or heavier, anxious, and exhausted? Your body is a sensitive instrument. It will often notice energetic shifts before your mind does. If you consistently leave interactions feeling worse than before, it's a sign that an energy imbalance is occurring. And the sooner you recognize it, the sooner you can take back control. The second step is understanding that you're not responsible for maintaining other people's emotional states. Many energy vampires keep their supply by convincing you that you owe them your time, your empathy, or your constant availability. They might say things like, "You're the only one who understands me," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." They might make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, accusing you of being cold or selfish. But their emotions are not your responsibility. Their healing is not your job. Their happiness is not yours to provide. The moment you stop believing that it is, their power over you begins to dissolve. The third step is learning to set clear, unapologetic boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks, and you decide who gets to enter and how long they stay. If someone constantly calls you to complain, you can say, "I care about you, but I can't talk about this right now." If a friend drains you with endless drama, you can gently step back and limit contact. If a family member tries to unload their emotional baggage onto you, you can listen compassionately without taking it on as your own. Remember, saying no does not make you unkind. It makes you conscious. It's also important to limit the energy you give unconsciously. Not all energy drain comes from words or actions. Sometimes it comes from attention. Energy flows where attention goes. If you constantly think about someone, replay conversations with them, or worry about their opinions, you are still feeding them, even when they're not around. Practicing mindfulness and redirecting your focus back to yourself is a powerful way to cut off this invisible energy leak. Another powerful tool is grounding. Before and after interacting with draining people, take time to reconnect with your own center. Breathe deeply. Feel your feet on the ground. Visualize your energy field as a protective boundary, not a wall that shuts others out, but a filter that lets love flow while keeping negativity away. These practices may sound simple, but they are profoundly effective. They remind your nervous system that you are safe, whole, and not responsible for anyone else's inner storms. Finally, one of the most transformative steps you can take is to examine why you attract or tolerate energy vampires in the first place. Often, our inability to set boundaries is rooted in deeper patterns, a childhood where we had to care for emotionally immature parents, a belief that our worth comes from being needed, or a fear of being abandoned if we stop giving. By healing these inner wounds, you make yourself less susceptible to people who feed on your energy. When you know you are worthy simply by existing, not by fixing, saving, or pleasing, you stop offering your life force to those who don't deserve it. It's worth noting that energy vampires are not always strangers. They can be your closest friends, your family members, even your romantic partners, and that's what makes this dynamic so difficult to break, because walking away might not be possible, and cutting contact might not feel right. In those cases, the key is not necessarily removal, but regulation. Limit the amount of energy you give. Protect your inner space. Offer support without sacrifice. And most importantly, make sure that the time you spend replenishing yourself is greater than the time you spend being drained. Healing from the effects of energy vampires is not just about saying no to others, it's about saying yes to yourself. It's about reclaiming your energy and redirecting it toward things that nourish you. Creativity, rest, meaningful relationships, silence, nature. It's about surrounding yourself with people who recharge you, who listen as much as they speak, who give as much as they take. It's about learning to walk away from conversations that leave you hollow and walking toward experiences that make you feel alive. And perhaps most importantly, it's about remembering this fundamental truth. Your energy is sacred. It is the source of your creativity, your joy, your purpose, your life. You have no obligation to give it away recklessly. You have the right to protect it fiercely. And you have the power to choose who has access to it. The moment you start honoring your energy, you stop attracting those who want to steal it. The moment you stop trying to light up everyone else's darkness, you begin to glow brighter yourself. Energy vampires will always exist. In workplaces, families, social circles, even within ourselves. But once you learn how they operate and how to guard your inner light, they lose their power. You no longer leave interactions feeling empty. You no longer mistake exhaustion for love. You no longer confuse self-sacrifice with kindness. Instead, you become the guardian of your own life force, strong, radiant, and whole. And when your energy belongs fully to you again, you will find that you have more to give, not because others demand it, but because it overflows naturally from a well that never runs dry. Some of the most dangerous toxic people you'll ever encounter don't shout, threaten, or force you to obey. They don't raise their voice, they don't use violence, and they often aren't even openly manipulative. In fact, many of them are people you deeply love, parents, partners, friends. But they wield a kind of power that's far more subtle and far more effective than aggression. They control you by manipulating your sense of guilt. They don't make you do things by force. They make you want to do them because if you don't, you'll feel like a bad person, an ungrateful child, a selfish partner, or an irresponsible friend. And that is precisely what makes their control so hard to break free from. Carl Jung once said, "Guilt is one of the most powerful tools the unconscious uses to maintain control." When someone plants guilt into your mind, they don't need chains or cages to hold you. You willingly build the prison around yourself. You sacrifice, compromise, and submit, not because anyone demanded it, but because you want to prove that you're good. Guilt manipulators come in many forms. In families, they might be parents who constantly remind you of their sacrifices to control your life. "I gave up everything for you. How could you move away? I worked myself to death to raise you, and now you only think of yourself." These words make you feel like a bad child for wanting independence. So, you turn down opportunities, give up dreams, or remain trapped in unhealthy dynamics. Not because you want to, but because you're desperate to silence the guilt they've planted in you. In romantic relationships, guilt manipulators are often partners who keep a tally of everything they've done for you. They remind you of their sacrifices, their efforts, and how much they love you. And if you don't respond the way they want, they make you feel like you're failing them. I've done everything for you, and you're still not happy? If you really loved me, you'd never treat me like this. And so, you try harder, you bend further, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being the bad one. In the workplace, they might be bosses or co-workers who weaponize a sense of duty to exploit you. This company gave you a chance. Now you can't refuse this project. I taught you everything. Leaving now would be betrayal. You end up overworking, taking on extra tasks, sacrificing your well-being. Not because you're passionate, but because you feel indebted. The common thread in all these scenarios is this: their power doesn't come from what they say, it comes from how you feel after they say it, and that feeling is guilt. So how do you break free from this invisible trap? The first and most important step is recognizing when guilt is being used against you. Guilt is a complex emotion. When we've truly done something wrong, it's a moral compass. It helps us correct our behavior. But when guilt shows up every time you set a boundary, every time you choose yourself, every time you act in alignment with your truth, that's not morality, that's manipulation. Ask yourself, did I actually do something wrong, or did I just fail to meet someone else's expectations? If it's the latter, that's not guilt you need to carry. The second step is learning to distinguish between obligation and kindness. Helping others is a beautiful thing, but it's only meaningful when it's a choice, not a compulsion. If you're doing something only because you're afraid of judgment, rejection, or being labeled selfish, then it's no longer kindness, it's control. And no one, not even those you love, has the right to dictate how you live your life. The third step is setting emotional boundaries and standing firm in them. When someone says, "I've done so much for you, how can you leave?" you can respond, "I'm grateful for everything you've done, but my decision is not a betrayal." When a parent says, "How could you abandon me?" you can say, "I love you, but I need to live my own life." Boundaries do not mean you are ungrateful. They are the only way to love without losing yourself. Another critical skill is learning to tolerate the discomfort of disappointing others. This is where many people fall into the guilt trap. We fear being seen as selfish, cold, or ungrateful. But the truth is, you cannot live a meaningful life if your goal is to please everyone. Sometimes you will have to let people down in order to stay true to yourself. Sometimes you will be misunderstood for choosing your own path. And that is the price of freedom. It's also essential to understand that some guilt is inherited, not earned. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, "I'll love you if you behave. I'll be proud of you if you obey." Guilt becomes wired into your nervous system. As an adult, it gets triggered even when you're not doing anything wrong. Recognizing this old conditioning is the first step in breaking free from it. A powerful practice in reclaiming your emotional freedom is learning to hand back feelings that don't belong to you. When someone tries to make you feel guilty, pause and ask yourself, whose emotion is this? If it's not a result of your wrongdoing, if it's simply their disappointment because they didn't get their way, it's not yours to carry. You can acknowledge their feelings without absorbing them. And finally, perhaps the most liberating truth you can embrace is this: you have the right to live your own life, even if that makes others unhappy. You have the right to chase your dreams without being chained to someone else's expectations. You have the right to set boundaries without apologizing. You have the right to say no without guilt. Your life is not a repayment plan for someone else's past. You were not born to fulfill their needs. You were born to live your own journey. The path to breaking free from guilt manipulation is not easy. It will involve moments of discomfort, disapproval, even anger from those who can no longer control you. But on the other side of that discomfort lies a kind of freedom you may never have known before, and the freedom to live without being controlled by someone else's emotions, the freedom to love without sacrificing yourself, the freedom to be fully, unapologetically you. And remember this, people who truly love you will never need to use guilt to keep you close. They will never have to remind you of their sacrifices to make you obey. They will never turn love into a debt you must repay. Real love does not require chains. It is not a bargain. It is a choice made freely, again and again, by two people who are both free to walk away and yet choose to stay. If you've made it this far, it means you've done something truly courageous. You've looked deeply into the darkest corners of human relationships. You've faced the difficult truths about manipulation, control, projection, emotional dependency, guilt, and energetic drain. You've learned to recognize the 6, and now 8, types of toxic people who can deeply shape and distort our lives. And, more importantly, you've learned how to protect yourself, how to set boundaries, safeguard your energy, and begin the long but liberating process of healing. But this journey is not over yet, because walking away from toxic people is not the final step. It's only the beginning of a new chapter. The chapter that follows is called rebirth. And rebirth is not simply about moving on, it's about transforming from darkness to light, from pain to strength, from dependency to self-sovereignty, from fear to love. 1. Acknowledge the wound and allow yourself to feel. The very first step toward true healing is deceptively simple yet profoundly difficult. Allow yourself to feel. In a world that constantly tells us to get over it, be strong, or move on, the most courageous thing you can do is to allow the pain to exist. You were hurt, you were betrayed, you were controlled, you were drained, manipulated, and made to doubt your worth. Maybe you lost years of your life in a relationship where you forgot who you were. That pain is real, and it deserves to be felt. Don't rush to forgive before you're ready. Don't force yourself to be fine before you've processed the hurt. Healing does not mean hiding the wound. It means facing it. Cry if you need to. Be angry if you must. Let the emotions rise without judgment. The feelings you refuse to face don't disappear. They burrow deeper. But the feelings you courageously embrace eventually dissolve, leaving behind clarity and peace. 2. Reconnect with the self you lost. One of the most devastating effects of toxic relationships is the disconnection they create, the disconnection between you and yourself. You spend so much time trying to please others, meet their expectations, or become the version of yourself they want, that you slowly silence your inner voice. You ignore your needs, you bury your dreams, and eventually you forget who you are. Healing is the art of remembering. Start small. Ask yourself, what do I truly enjoy? What kind of life do I want to live? What did I dream of before someone told me I couldn't? Reconnecting with yourself is not a single act. It's a journey. At first, you might feel lost, but little by little, you'll begin to recognize the person you were always meant to be, and that rediscovery will become your greatest source of strength. 3. Rebuild boundaries. The immune system of the soul. Boundaries are not just lines, they are the immune system of your soul. After leaving toxic dynamics, learning how to build and maintain boundaries is essential to ensuring you never fall into the same patterns again. Boundaries are not selfish. They are self-respect. They are not about pushing people away. They are about ensuring that those who enter your life deserve to stay. Start with simple steps. Learn to say no without apology. Learn to prioritize your needs without seeking permission. Learn to walk away from conversations, relationships, or situations that drain you. Learn to listen to your body, because it often knows when your limits are being crossed before your mind does. And remember, the people who get angry when you set boundaries are often the ones who benefited from you not having any. 4. Transform pain into wisdom. One of Carl Jung's most powerful insights was this: there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The suffering you've endured is not meaningless, not if you choose to learn from it. Every manipulation teaches you to recognize red flags. Every betrayal teaches you the value of trust. Every time your energy was drained, you learn how to protect your inner light. And every attempt to control you teaches you the power of reclaiming your freedom. Rewrite your story, not as a story of victimhood, but of resilience, not as a story of destruction, but of rebirth. Be grateful to the past, not because it was easy, but because it shaped the strength you now possess. You have walked through the storm and survived. You have faced the darkness and found the light within you. You have learned to build boundaries, not as walls, but as gates, to guard what is sacred and welcome only what is true. And most importantly, you have remembered something that no toxic person, no painful past, and no manipulation can ever take away from you. Your soul is still whole. It was never broken, only hidden beneath layers of fear, shame, and false stories. From this day forward, may you rise with new strength. May your heart be soft, yet unbreakable. May your boundaries be firm, yet built with love. May your future be free of chains, free of guilt, and full of choices made by you, not by anyone else. And when the echoes of the past try to pull you back, may you always hear a louder voice inside whispering, "I am enough, I am free, I am whole." If this message has touched something deep inside you, know that it's not the end. It's only the beginning of a new chapter. There is so much more healing, so much more growth, and so many more truths to discover. And we will walk that path together. So, if you're ready to keep growing, in strength, in wisdom, and in self-love, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and become part of this space where souls like yours come to rise. Leave a comment below and share one truth you're claiming for yourself today. Bien imbié, because writing it is the first step to owning it. Until we meet again in the next video, I send you this blessing. May your heart be your compass. May your peace be your power. And may every step you take from here lead you closer, not to who you were told to be, but to who you truly are. With love, with light, and with deep gratitude, thank you for being here.